And we are live. All right. Welcome once again to another edition of We the People, presented by the Diamond Factory. As you know, every Monday and Friday, we try to bring different people of different authorities and organizations on to talk about things that are very relevant in our society today. But before we get started, let's get our little commercial stuff out of the way. As you can see on the bottom, you can subscribe and donate to our YouTube channel, Cash App JEK3. With that being said, let's get straight to the program. Our guest tonight is Debbie Osborne. How are you doing tonight, Deb?
I'm doing fine. Thank you so much for the
I, I,
opportunity.
I hope you don't mind if I call you Debbie.
Oh, no, that's what I go by.
All right. So tell us a little bit about yourself. Where you are and how you got started in your profession.
Well, I am a social worker who burned out. I got tired of dipping out the ocean with a teaspoon. And so I retreated to law school and kept my passion for working with kids. I've done several jobs. I've worked as a volunteer, I've been a foster parent, and with my legal practice, I've concentrated on advising and defending youth organizations. So I've spent a lot of my time defending them in lawsuits, and then have recently started doing more at the front end to try to get them to get policies that keep them from getting sued.
I like that expression, dipping it out the ocean with a spoon.
Yeah,
I might have to borrow that one from you.
you're
Uh,
you're welcome to it. It's not copyrighted.
so, what was the pivotal moment that led you to dedicate your career to helping organizations build safety policies?
I think it was a lot of, pivotal moments. It was a lot of decades of watching clients, get in trouble because people, but they, just didn't have good policies to keep out predators. People who, um, are dangerous to children they're drawn to organizations that serve young people. I think it was John Dillinger who said that he robbed banks because that's where the money is. So a lot of predators are drawn to organizations that. And then, times have changed. There's a lot more um, problems I started noticing and recognizing the statistics that child-on-child abuse is actually much more prevalent, even though we're very worried about adult-on-child abuse. It's much more common for kids to terrorize and victimize each other. So it was a lot of things like that that just sort of added up and um, my co-author joined my law firm, and he's done a lot in child welfare in areas. His experience, he has led child welfare agencies, which I've never actually been in charge. I've always been on the outside advising. So the two of us have complementary experiences and skill sets.
Uh, would you mind walking us through a real world example of what can happen when a youth organization lacks a strong child protection policy?
Well, I've got several cases. I've got cases that I have defended range from youth organizations that had staff members who everyone thought were wonderful staff members. The staff loved them, kids loved them. Parents invited them vacation, and then it gradually started coming out that during these times visiting the families, and it was particularly vulnerable kids, single parent families, families without a strong parental structure, there, dysfunctional families, that the staff member was taking advantage of the kids and sexually abusing them. And so the organization didn't they had not done a good job of necessarily setting in place boundaries so that when the other staff saw things that looked a little strange, they didn't recognize it as predatory behavior, and then they didn't have a policy in place for reporting it and responding to it. So there's things like that. I've also had cases where you have kids in an organization, residential overnight camp or retreat, and the kids end up bullying another kid. Back in the day, they used to have blanket parties where they would, throw a blanket over a kid and everybody beat him up.
Who
So
did that in the army too? Was it just
yes, exactly, exactly. So now we call it hazing and bullying, and but organizations have been slow to catch on to that danger. And again, several of my clients that I represented and defended, they just didn't have good processes in place um, for staff to recognize the danger signals and report them.
But aren't there, like a certain background checks and things that you have to go through? I mean,
You do. There are, well, you're supposed to. Sometimes they don't get around to doing background checks. Background checks are less of a problem now than they used to be because they've become so standard and everyone. The problem is you a lot of predators don't get caught and they don't have a record. And so you're not going to catch them that way. You have to train your staff to notice the danger signals. And kids, of course, don't have records, at least none that you can get a hold of. So you can end up with an aggressive, dangerous child in your program and not have any way of ahead of time. So you have to have boundary rules and training for the staff to recognize the problem behavior.
now, if you had to narrow it down to three non-negotiable moments of any solid child protection policy, what would they be and why?
They would be to understand the risk that you face, which is why so I would start with that because a lot of my clients were so focused, for example, on adult predators, and they had really good policies against screening out sex abusers, very good screening policies for that. Recognize the danger that kids pose to each other. So you have to recognize the risks that you have, and then you have to set up very clear boundaries so that everyone knows what is expected of them. And then you need very clear rules about reporting and what to report and who to report to. So those are the three non-negotiables. And then, after that, you have to establish an atmosphere of safety so that the staff feels that they will be protected policies. But none of that matters until you know what you're dealing with, have clear boundaries and clear channels for reporting for the staff and volunteers. Always include volunteers in that for the people who work with you to report what they're seeing.
So, for a group that's just starting out, or that has never had any formal policy, what's the best place to begin? And what's the very first document or conversation you'd recommend?
Very first thing that we do with our clients is we give them a checklist and say, go audit what you have and check and see if a lot of groups have more policies than they realize, and then they also have more holes than they realize. So we give, and this is in our book, but we also give it to the clients and people who are consult and say, here's this audit checklist. Go see what you have. Yes, no, or we have some and need more. And so once they know what they have, then I send them to talk to other people in their field to see what policies they need. And so that's a whole long different ways that they can research that and look for it. But the very is to take a look at what they have.
Okay, and then kind of build it from there. So it's almost like building any foundation. You must once get that solid foundation laid before you can build upon it.
Right, right, exactly, exactly.
So many people think that or they assume that child protection means keeping predators out. But you already mentioned other risks like bullying, child on child abuse. Uh, so, what are some of the other risks and blind spots that organizations should be addressing?
Well, they need to, for example, understand that if you have an adult with a bad temper, then you run a risk of inappropriate physical abuse, not just sexual abuse, but they might smack a kid when they lose their temper, or if you're in an organization that has kids with problematic behavior, you have to train your staff in de-escalation techniques. So that's one of the reasons you need to look at your risks and figure out what you have. It's not all about predators or sexual abuse. Statistically, adults abuse children very, very rarely. It's just that the ramifications of that are so terrible. It's high risk. Well, it's high consequences. But statistically, it's very rare that it happens. Um, Kids, that they get hurt in the swimming pool or in the canoes or on the archery range at summer camp, much more frequently than they get abused by staff. So you have to know all of the risks, and it depends on the organization. Child care centers don't do a lot of archery ranges, but they do have kids who fall off the slide or kids who bite each other. So that's why you have to understand your audience and know what sort of risks what sort of risks there are to kids in your organization.
Now, one thing that I've kind of noticed, and maybe it's because of my age, but it seems like there are more of boot camp style organizations for troubled youth. When does boot camp become abusive behavior?
Well, it is. Times have changed. 30 years ago, um, boot camps were all the vogue because it was sort of the military, scared straight kind of ideas for kids.
Right.
And now, that's why a lot of it is coming out now because the standards have changed, and we're not quite so accepting of physical abuse or emotional abuse that happened in some of those. What we're seeing now with well-run camps is more of it's high structure. You definitely need high structure, and you definitely need consequences for kids, clear, consistent consequences. But we're beginning to understand that you have to have emotional safety first. Otherwise, you're just terrorizing the kids. So, scared straight type programs, I'm not even sure how many of your audience is old enough to remember those, but
I was a part of some of the original Scared Straight. I was incarcerated in New Jersey, so I remember
right.
those very well.
Right. And I mean the problem with it is in the name. It's based on fear. And so it has a lot of trauma. It certainly can help kids and with understanding how the real world works, but you have to have secure attachment and emotional stability for kids. Otherwise, and let's face it, a lot of these kids who are getting into trouble, they come from traumatic backgrounds, and all you're doing is exacerbating the trauma if you don't do the emotional grounding first. So there's a lot of wilderness programs that they have to be high structure because
Of
you're
course.
taking kids out in areas where there are bears and there are cougars and there is the law of gravity if you step off the trail. So it's just this is real world consequences. So you have to have high structure to keep them safe, but we're also understanding that a big part of working with them, there has to be high nurture along with the high structure.
Yeah. Sometimes the discipline or the high structure tends to. Well, first of all, I think you have to have an organization and a child that's willing to accept. Uh,
Oh yeah.
you know, I've been one of those hard headed ones when I got in the program. I did what had to be done, and that was it. So
But sometimes you just have to let kids hit their head against the brick wall enough times. That kids, they're not wired to listen to our words. We like to think that they do, but they don't. For most of the time, the old Charlie Brown cartoons, I think, were brilliant in that they tapped into a reality that kids hear adults. It's that, wah, wah, wah trombone sound that you get in those commercials, those, cartoons.
yeah, it doesn't matter how much grandma tells you about her experience. You have to hit your head up against the wall yourself.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So now you've shown that even small budget strap programs can build robust policies. What are the highest, or what is the highest leverage and the lowest cost actions any organization can take?
Well, the highest leverage and even though it does have a cost, the return on the investment is very high, and that is criminal records checks. You have to do those. Those are they're not negotiable any longer. But then after that, I think boundary rules. It doesn't cost anything to figure out what is acceptable touching, what is not acceptable touching, and to train your staff in setting those boundary rules. And then the other things that we talk to people about doing is if there's a rule, if there's a suggestion that someone brings to you, for example, if they say you need uh, doors with windows in all of your classrooms, and you don't have the budget to replace all of your doors. You figure out what the principle is behind that rule. The principle behind that rule is not being able to, for an adult to isolate a child behind a barrier that no one can see through. So you substitute with a rule that says the door is always open. You never close the door. And then you also have a rule of where the administrators supervise by walking and looking in the door and checking on things. So it doesn't cost anything to have a rule that the door has to be open, and it only costs slightly more to have your supervisors, enough supervisors so that they can um, supervise by seeing what's happening.
Now, in your book, you outlined a 120-day program. What are the critical milestones that you'd aim to hit in your first 30 days?
First 30 days, you have to get your team together. You have to figure out who's doing what. We have two particular kinds of teams. One is the child safety team. They're the ones who write the preventive policies, and then the other one is the incident response team, and they write the policies for what happens if an incident comes up. So that would include knowing your mandated reporter responsibilities, figuring out training staff in mandated reporter, and finding your insurance, those kinds of things. So that would be the first thing would be to get your staff together. And then the second thing would be to get your teams together. And that the teams would consist of both staff and stakeholders. Hopefully, you can pull in volunteers from your board, folks with insurance experience, law enforcement experience, legal experience who can devote some time and help you with this. And then that team does the audit, figures out what's going on, if what you have, and also researches the standard of care. Look at we list several different sources. Look at the regulations. Look at what other folks what other organizations like yours in the area are doing. Ask questions. Look for insurance companies to have a lot of sample policies out on their websites. Um, and then we also have questionnaires that you send to your staff and get them to fill out. The people who know what's going on are the frontline people. They know a lot more than administrators about what is actually happening on the ground. The Challenger disaster, which led to a lot of the types of just compliance safety culture that we talk about in our book. Um, the upper echelons didn't know about the O-rings, but the engineers did. They just got tired of telling people. So the questionnaires are a way of finding out from the engineers what's going on the front lines. And so those things in the first 30 days are really just getting your folks together and then figuring out what you've got and what your staff thinks about your rules and how they're working.
Now, you talked about mandated reporting. Mandated reporting usually trips up a lot of volunteers and
Oh, yeah.
staff.
Yep.
How do you define a mandated reporter, and what's the simplest way to train them so they actually make timely and confident reports?
Well, who is a mandated reporter is going to vary from one state to there's some states have that everybody is a reporter. Some states have certain certain job descriptions. Anyone who works with a youth organization or works with an organization that serves youth, whether that's a child care center or a church or a synagogue or a camp, every state that I know of sweeps in at least people, volunteers and staff who work with young people. So, um, the training, usually you can get training online through your Department of Social Services or Child Protection Agency. A lot of that training, I think it's too short and doesn't do a great job. There's which is why my co-author and I we did have set up some online courses for with some training in that. And um, so you just look for different sources on what you're looking for is a what did your child protection agency think um, is needs to be reported, and that's why I say for that sort of reporting you go to them. But then the signs and symptoms of abuse, we do that. There's several other organizations that do that, and those are the kind of things that you need to have your staff recognizing. It just and you have the type of training I do, I always call it red flags and pink flags. There are red flags that you just report. Do not pass go, do not collect $200, just report. If a child tells you something, it doesn't matter whether you believe the child, it doesn't matter who they're talking about, you report that. Then there's a lot of pink flags, which are um, symptoms that could have a lot of different reasons. So if you have a child, say a younger child who's been toilet trained who starts having toilet accidents, that's a sign of anxiety. It could be abuse, it could be their dog died, it could be mom and dad are getting a divorce, it could be the grandma's moving away, any number of reasons. So you don't immediately make a report of that because you're just going to overwhelm the system. But you do watch for patterns and ask for questions, or ask questions to try to find out what's on the kid's mind. Same thing with physical bruises. You know, kids do walk into doors, but they don't walk into doors 3 times in a month generally. Now I may have when I was a kid because I was clumsy, but but still, that's where you watch for patterns and ask questions.
Okay. Now, embedding policy into culture seems to also be something that is kind of, I would say, relatively new. Um,
Mhm.
and so policies on paper are one thing. Living with every day,
Right.
is another. So, how do you help organizations move from checking the box to truly making the child's safety part of their DNA?
Well, that's where we talk a lot about child safety culture, and that's because your staff has to feel psychologically safe that if they report something to you, that they're going to be protected. You need strong whistleblower policies, but they also need to know that um, they're not going to be responsible for getting their friends fired over some minor something. So that's why, just for example, I really, really hate zero tolerance policies because zero tolerance policies don't give you any leeway or they don't give you any nuance between a good faith mistake and a reckless or certainly malevolent person who needs to be fired. So we one of the things that you really need to do is do a triage. We have a triage recommended decision tree in our book where we talk about was this an innocent mistake? Was it the first time? Is this a mistake that this person keeps making? Um, what are the possible side effects? So let's say you have a rule that a child you're not ever supposed to be alone in a room with a child, and you have a 8-year-old who comes running into your office and slams the door and throws himself into your lap and is crying because he just fell down on the playground. Well, your first reaction there is not going to be to get up and open the door. Your first reaction is going to be to comfort the child and then go get a Band-Aid.
Yes.
So, is that's a technical violation of the policy, but it's not a violation that you need to do anything with. On the other hand, I've heard reports of, teachers who take the kids into the bathroom and close the door, and it could be that they're abusing the kids in there. It could be they're just giving the kid a timeout. But that's where you need to talk to them and say, "No, our rule is you don't take the kids into the bathroom and close the door." With younger kids, you particularly don't leave them in the dark. We find a different timeout place, and so let's start doing timeout here. So, you have to make the distinction between what's a teaching opportunity and what's a discipline opportunity. And once the staff feels comfortable, psychologically comfortable and safe, that A, they're going to be listened to, and B, that the response is going to be proportionate and appropriate, then everyone starts feeling vested and starts internalizing the rules.
Now, I want to go back to something that we talked about a little bit earlier, and that was the scared straight type programs.
Hmm.
Uh, and because you had mentioned background checks, criminal background checks. Um, in the scared straight program that we had in New Jersey, uh, we were bringing kids in from usually the age of 12 to 16. And the idea was having your peers or your peers in the neighborhood show you the pitfalls of crime.
Hmm.
Now, we also, as I got older, but I know this is also a problem now. I've seen it right here down here in Horton Plaza, where you have a number of runaway teens that also engage in drug activities as
Hmm.
well as other things. Now, in some of those sessions, if you bring an adult into that setting, and by adult, I'm talking about someone, maybe 35 or older. I'm not talking about somebody that's, within their age group.
Hmm.
But I found that sometimes that goody two shoe person trying to talk to a streetwise kid does not work. Do you
Oh,
have
no.
counseling programs where you, kind of uh, uh, indoctrinate the two, I guess?
Well, one thing you have to realize is kids don't have to be completely protected from people with criminal records because, to give you an example, if you have a basketball tournament that's open to the public, you have no way of vetting who's coming in. If you take kids down for a service project to serve meals at the homeless shelter, you have no way to vet the people who are coming through the chow line. What you do have to do is make sure that there is someone with a clean record, clean background check, who is responsible for keeping eyes on that kid at all times. And so, same with field trips. If you take kids to museums, or the band goes to Disney World, or it marches in the Macy's Thanksgiving Day parade, um, you can't you can't vet everyone who comes in contact with the kids. What you vet is the people who are have control of the situation and are going to be responsible for supervising the kids. And, you don't have to have eyes on the kids all the time at Disney World. but you take reasonable risks. And so, with the kind of thing that you're talking about with streetwise kids, yeah, you might want to have somebody with a criminal record who comes in and talks to them. But the person with a criminal record does not have unsupervised access to them. They are very limited and very restricted in the contact that they have.
So we do uh, getting back to policies and audits. So where do external audits and cell audits fit into your 120-day timeline?
Well,
What
we recommend audits at 2 points. The self-audit is within the first 30 days so that you know what you have. The first 60 days is where you start writing your policies. And these are not hard and fast. They're just they're
timelines?
yeah, that's right. They're suggestions, and it really is to just say to folks, look, if you do these things one thing at a time and build one at a time, you can eat the elephant one bite at a time. So, the second time that we recommend doing the audits and the staff surveys is once a year. This is another way to make it part of your culture. It's not just a written thing that's sitting up on the shelf, but once a year, you are going back through and looking again at your policies and whether they worked, and auditing the not auditing, but surveying the staff and volunteers to see if how they are feeling about how the policies are working in practice.
Is there anything, well, as you said, how they're working in practice, but is there any other things that the team should be looking for when
Well,
they?
Well, you definitely look for, incident reports, after the first year. You pull back and say, you know, where were our if you're a childcare center, where were our kids getting hurt? If we have, way too many kids getting hurt on the slide, then we need to pay attention to what's happening at the slide. Um, you, do once a year, I recommend you go through your um, staff records to make sure that you have the criminal records checks, that you have done all of the reference checks, and you know, checking with personal references and professional references. That's just sitting down and going through every file. And if you
You broke up on me right there, Deb.
okay, there we go. I'm sorry.
Okay,
Um,
we were talking about the different the audits and what they should look for after a year. Did I lose you? Uh, Try coming out and going back in, Deb. I think you froze up there for a moment. Perhaps you can't hear me. Seem to have a little technical difficulty here with hearing Deb. Let's see if we can get it back on. Hello, Deb. Uh, let's see. Maybe it's me. I'll try to refresh. let's see if we can get Deb back online here. Hopefully. Let's see. Uh, reaching out to Deb to see if she can retry her link. Can you hear me now?
Yes, my
Okay.
apologies. We had a glitch in the electricity went out. So
Oh,
I'm
I thought it was my platform. I'm sorry.
no, it happens sometimes in our neighborhood.
No, hey, I'm in California. You can, wildfire, tornado.
That's right.
It might be anything. Earthquake. So, uh, so let's kind of take a back up, kind of where we started here. Uh, so, where do the external audits and self audits fit into your 120-day timeline? And what should teams be looking for when they conduct them?
Well, in the first 30 days, it's the audits to figure out where your staff is, if they think the policies are working that you have, and to figure out what you have, and to figure out where your holes are. And then we recommend audits every year after that. So audit, for example, the records, go through your staff files to make sure you have the criminal records checks. If you have a goal of a certain number of professional and personal references, make sure the documentation is there. Fix anything that you're missing, and then run those staff surveys again and see if the staff if things have improved with the staff's view of how things are working. And then look through your incident reports and see if there are particular problem areas that are showing up. Um, we also recommend getting someone, either law enforcement or someone with experience, to think like a bad guy, sort of the equivalent of ethical hacking, and get them to look at your policies and see what sort of holes they would find if they were trying to cause problems. Um, and you know who will be able to tell you a lot about how well your policies are working is kids in your program. If you can alumni who have been through the program, we all knew in elementary school which areas of the playground the teachers wouldn't notice what was going on. The teachers may not have known that, but we certainly did.
Of course.
So, right, right. So, talk to alumni of your program and find out what holes they saw or know about. So that's sort of the year. Well, actually, do that within the first 30 days, but then um, in the yearly, so you can tell how well you're doing with your programs.
So graduates of your program can actually come back and make a contribution.
Oh, yes. Yes, most definitely.
Finally, as technology and social norms evolve, what emerging challenges do you see on the horizon for youth serving groups, and how should they begin preparing today?
Well, there's a couple of challenges. Part of the problem is society is changing, so they're expecting more and more safety for kids without realizing that there can be such thing as keeping kids too safe. We're finally beginning to realize, for example, that children of helicopter parents are physically more safe, but they also have skyrocketing incidents of anxiety and depression. And by protecting kids too much, we're teaching them that the world is a scary place and that they can't navigate it without our help. So I think an emerging challenge for us is how to protect kids, but at the same time, teach them how to be functioning adults and teach them that they can manage the world and teach them the life skills. And sometimes teaching those life skills requires letting them take risks. So understanding the difference between risk and danger is is an emerging trend that I see. We are starting to get more and more evidence-based research showing that bubble wrapping our kids causes mental health problems for them. And so how to balance the safety that we all want to see for our kids with at the same time letting them explore their world and solve problems for themselves and get themselves into trouble and then get themselves out, um, which builds resilience and self-confidence and self-esteem, I think is one challenge that we have ahead of us.
So tell us about your book. The title, what is it about, and the process that you went through in writing the book.
Well, the title of it is "Protecting Other People's Children" because it's about child protection. It's my second book, and my first book was "Raising Other People's Children," which was my experiences as a foster parent and a step parent. And so when my co-author and I started working on the second book, he and my publisher liked the idea of of a rhyming, I guess, type name, and so we went with protecting other people's children. And the process was really just my law partner, co-author, who's Tom Rawlings. He's been a juvenile court judge and a child advocate, and then was head of Georgia's Child Protection Agency before he came back into private practice. And so we just sat down and took a lot of the frankly, took a lot of the blog posts, a lot of the things that we had been writing, a lot of the, checklists that we had already developed for our clients, and, y they were the became the spine of the book. So we each spearheaded different, I mean, if you want the technical of how we did it, we assigned each other different chapters, and one person would write it, and then the other would trade, and the other person would edit it and make changes. So um, those it was really distilling a lot of the lessons that we've learned over the years watching the things that have gotten our clients into trouble.
So how did you get? Usually, kids are very, like you said, resilient and usually willing to learn. But it's usually the parents that you have the problem with. Years of my family did it this way, or this is a sign of weakness, or my child doesn't need that type. How do you overcome those type of obstacles? I know when I was growing up, uh, and I can't say it was their fault. It was what was done at that particular time. but it was much easier to put a child on Ritalin than it was to find out what was really wrong.
Yeah, yeah. Well, there's been a lot of changes in youth organizations, and a lot of those standards have changed. I think, our education system still treats boys like they're defective girls, and I don't know when that's going to change, and they'll start recognizing that boys have different needs for activity and that sort of thing than girls do. Um, talk again, not individual kids, but just talking in terms of broad population trends. Um, but I think that the biggest challenge we see with youth organizations is the ones who say the way we've done it has been okay, and the problem is because um, there are risks that are minuscule, like, the chances of a predator getting into a particular organization, um, are really small because so many kids, it happens so rarely, but when it does happen, it is incredibly devastating for everyone involved, and so, kids are most often abused by folks in their family, or extended relatives, or mom's boyfriend, or those sort of people. It happens there much more often than it does in youth organizations, but it does happen. And I think just convincing folks that it's a risk that they need to pay attention to is sometimes challenging. However, we have seen um, in the last 15 years, we've seen a lot more organizations become a lot more concerned about this area. And I think it's because of the news reports about all the religious groups that have been caught and have the Catholic Church, and then you've got overseas, you've got Oxfam, which is not a religious organization, but is a youth organization, and then back here in the States, you've got the Southern Baptist controversy over the past few years. So there's been a lot in the news about youth organizations that are starting to get people's attention.
Now, another thing that I've found, and again, I guess it's a generational thing, but it seems that we have fewer organizations that are seeing to the needs of our youth. A lot of places, police athletic league is closed down. You have boys and girls clubs that used to be a part of the neighborhood that are no longer part of the neighborhood or part of anybody's budget. So, uh, how do you outreach these kids that have fewer opportunities now?
I don't know. We've become more isolated as a society is part of the problem. The other part of it is we have raised the stakes so high that many people and organizations are thinking it's just not worth it. I'll go sell vacuum cleaners. So I'm not I'm not sure.
Isn't that somewhat of I don't know, you'd rather go sell vacuum cleaners than save your future generation?
Well, I'm talking about any
Yeah, no, well,
individual,
yeah,
Well, yeah, but
but it is somewhat of a true statement, though.
yeah, because when trying to save a future generation can subject you to false claims that can put you in jail, that's kind of a scary thing to do. So it's a high. It has become because we're paying so much more attention to kids, and there are many good things that have happened in the child protection field. Um, but A, it's hard to get people to put themselves at risk for to work with young people, and then because stereotype, you don't see um, men in early education anymore because of the stereotype, and parents are so suspicious. Um, and then the other thing is because of hefty verdicts, jury verdicts in these cases, insurance premiums are so high that it's becoming a serious problem for youth organizations to get insurance. Um, so there are a lot of them that are going out of business because they just can't get the insurance they need. So there's a lot of different reasons for these things disappearing. Um, and sometimes it's unintended consequences of very good policies, and sometimes it's unintended consequences of overvigilant parents. There's a lot of well-meaning people making a lot of decisions that, when you put them all together, end up with fewer opportunities for kids.
Um, it sounds a little bleak for our for the future of our children, but right now it seems like it's much easier to incarcerate a child than it is to educate him.
Well, I wouldn't go that far. I know there are certain areas where, foster care, it's hard to get the money for the mental health care that these kids need. Um, and then don't get me started on the government and court policies that allow adults um, to quit taking their medicine and sit on the street corner as schizophrenics if they want to. Um, so it again, it's a lot of complicated policies that you put them together. It's not. It's harder to incarcerate kids than it used to be, and kids they're not incarcerated that much because the juvenile system is not designed that way. But the problem we end up with is you have foster kids who age out and become homeless. They may turn to crime. That's how they end up in prison. There's a lot of foster kids who age out of the system. They're disproportionately represented in the criminal justice system. Um,
Especially back during my generation, because
yeah,
you know,
yeah.
so I look forward. I mean, I have grandkids. I have great grandkids now. So to me, this is something that's very important. Not to see, that same prison to pipeline, uh, you know, uh, uh, experience. And I know here in California, the juvenile system. I would say California, Texas, maybe a few other states out here in the West. Uh, maybe Ohio, which I've had some experience with, Florida. But for the most part, it does seem like today uh, it's an effort to actually put in the time to help our children, whereas back in the day, the term "it took a village to raise a child," uh, that's no longer true because if my neighbor yells at my kid, then I got a problem at my neighbor, even though my kid might be wrong.
Right, right. Yeah, again, a lot of it is parenting standards have changed, and parenting expectations, and then I don't know, soapbox is number 457 is what we did to our kids with COVID policies. Um, So, the learning loss and from shutting down the schools and the mental health problems that it caused to shut down schools. I don't know how many years it'll be before we recover from that. Some of our kids will never make up the the learning that they lost during those time frames. So um, a lot of times there. I don't want to say it's bleak because there are a lot of great organizations out there, and I do um, work with a lot of great organizations, um, and they are committed to working with the kids. And this is where our book we talk about how the organization can protect its mission. I don't ever talk about protecting the organization because that sounds very selfish, but they have a mission of taking care of kids. And I always believe that if you don't believe that the organization you're working with should stay in business to fulfill its mission, then you need to go work somewhere else because that's what these organizations do. Their mission is very important. And I guess I tend to be an optimist that there will be um, organizations available to kids because there will always be a need for it. Um, there may be fewer, but there are still people out there who are dedicated to working with kids and want to serve them in a safe manner.
Yes, I do believe that, and once again, as I said, our children are our future. I know, it's cliche, but that to me that's the way it was. I think back in the time when uh, you know uh, you had the good examples, and you had the organizations where if you felt unsafe, you felt that you had somewhere to go. I remember, sometimes going down to the community center, sometimes going over to the YMCA. As I mentioned, the Police Athletic League, these different organizations where, if you were a latchkey kid, oh, wow, I'm really dating myself now. But, uh,
Yes.
but these were places, where you went to see your friends, you went to feel safe. And
Hmm.
a lot of these places are defunct or closed now. And with I think technology has ran ahead of our kids as far as education.
Yes, we are still trying to get a handle on technology, and there is a lot of interesting evidence out there that technology is causing a lot of anxiety and depression among our kids. There's certainly a high correlation between technology use and
Uh, uh, well, Dev, I want to thank you so much for taking the time to come and talk with us this evening. Uh, I'd like to be back in touch with you, and maybe you could get me in touch with some of these organizations, and I could bring some of them on also. But do you have any final thoughts for our audience, or do you have another book coming out,
I, I
website, anything
I
like
don't have yeah I don't have a book coming out. We do have a lot of online courses that were put into these issues and um, more training available for youth organizations because a lot of the problem is just knowing what to do and knowing where to start and what steps to take. So I think I would want to say to folks as a final, it's working with kids has been the most challenging and most rewarding thing that I've ever done in my life, and I love working with youth mainly because they're so much nicer than I am, and I'm a very left-brained attorney.
that?
So I love working with my clients. They are all wonderful, caring, very nice people. And I just with my book, I just want to keep them from hurting themselves by being too nice to everyone. So trying to get them to have a healthy dose of skepticism and self-protection or
Well,
protection of their mission.
believe me, if you've lived as long as I have, you'll see that there's plenty of skepticism to go around.
Yes,
you, no matter how much the world keeps changing, we still have our everyday problems. Uh,
right.
but I want to thank you so much once again for your time. I hope we can have you back. I hope we didn't bore you too much or
Oh,
get
no,
with some of our questions.
I
Uh,
thoroughly enjoyed it, and I apologize again for the electricity glitch that I couldn't control.
don't worry about it. And thank you so much. I appreciate your time. You have a great night.
Thank you. Take care.
Yes. Uh, so that was our guest, Miss Debbie Osborne, excuse me, and we had a very good conversation about youth and youth groups. I would love to have her back on again. So look forward to talking to Debbie again. And if you have any uh, time, you could always go back and replay it on either YouTube, Facebook, or LinkedIn. Thank you very much, everyone. You have a great night. See you next week. Let's see.